Good evening Year 11 and welcome to the Night Before News support package for tomorrow morning's exam. In this PowerPoint I intend to go through the different types of questions with the different number of marks and how to answer them. At the end of the PowerPoint there are two slides that show you all the formulas that you need to know. So stay tuned until the end. So in this exam you will get 6 different types of questions that carry 6 different marks. The first marks that you will get are 1-mark questions, and they are typically command words such as give, identify, complete, match and state. They're usually 1-word answers based on knowledge only. I will go through these in a bit more detail in the next couple of slides. I'm going to do questions 2, 3 and 4 marks as the same type because they're all usually explained questions. The difference being that for the higher mark questions you might be asked to identify two advantages or 2 disadvantages, and therefore you would have to write the same thing but for 2 different points. Again, I'll go through that in a little bit more detail in subsequent slides. There are 2 6-mark questions as well, in which case you have to discuss. You will be given 2 sides of an argument and you will have to discuss both sides. And the final type of question are calculation questions, where they will ask you to apply a formula or draw a graph or label a graph. In the following slides I will talk about each question with examples a lot more. So here is a typical 1-mark question. Give 1 reason why it's important for an enterprise to keep invoices. So a 1-mark question means it's a 1-word answer. It should be purely based on theory, and therefore the theory in this question is about the importance of keeping invoices. It's based purely on knowledge, so all you need to know are the reasons for keeping invoices. Typical answers are from the mark scheme are there. Just have a little look at them and make sure you know the advantages of keeping invoices, and then carry on. So here is another typical 1-mark question. Although the question carries 2 marks, it requires the same process as a 1-mark question, but you're just making 2 points. The reason I've put this question on is because you need to take note of the question. It says for 2 advantages to an enterprise. A lot of students make mistakes here by just giving 2 advantages that may be from a customer point of view. But in the question, it does state to an enterprise. Therefore, you need to be very careful of reading the question and making sure you know what it's asking you. So, typical advantages of a business paying by credit card are there now. Again, this is off the mark scheme, and any 2 of those 4 would get you the mark. Again, pause the video, have a look at those answers, have a look at those advantages, get them in your head. So this question carries 2 marks. However, if you look at the command word, this time it's identify rather than give, so therefore it's still only a 1-mark question for knowledge and theory. However, there is a common mistake made on these types of questions. If you look at the question carefully, it does state from the list above. The mistake that students make is they will give any 2 startup costs that are not from the list above. Now, where they may correctly identify 2 startup costs, because they're not from the list in the STEM, which are the words in the box at the top of the question, means they will not get the marks. So very simply, in this question, the answer is sines and weighing scales. Any other answer would not be accepted. So please make sure you are reading the question properly. So here's another question that carries 2 marks, but is a give question, which means it's just theoretically based. I want you to take note again though of the stem and the question. The stem being the words in the little table at the top. The question asks for 2 other examples of stakeholders. Therefore, your answer cannot be the owner or the manager because it is in the stem of the question. So any other 2 stakeholders would get the marks, but not owner or manager. So please read the stem and the question very carefully to make sure you know exactly what's being asked. Okay, let's move on to 2 mark questions. Now 2 mark questions will be the same approach for 2, 3, 4 mark questions. It just depends on the number of points that you have to make. So here's a typical 2 mark question. Explain one impact of an enterprise of undercharging customers. The explain is the command word, therefore it's 2 marks. You'll get 1 point for the theory, or 1 mark for the theory, i.e. what are the impacts of undercharging customers to the business, and then you would need to use a connective and explain why it would be an impact. That would get you the 2nd mark. So it looks a bit like this. You may write, it would delay the cash inflows into the enterprise, so therefore that is an impact on the business. Therefore you get 1 mark for that. You then stick a connective in. The connective in this case would be because, and the reason it's because is because you're going to explain how it affects the business, because it would have to go back to ask for more money. There's your extra 2nd mark from there. So the approach is the same in terms of making sure that you know how many points you have to make, but you do make a point and then explain it. Other things you could have had for this question are there in front of you. Okay, let's move on to a 4 mark question. Now don't be daunted by a 4 mark question, as it's exactly the same as a 2 mark question, but you're making 2 points. So here's a typical 4 mark question. Explain 2 advantages for an enterprise of cash flow forecasting. So the command word is explain, but the question carries 4 marks. So therefore it's asking for 2 advantages. The theory is the same, it's the advantages of cash flow. You need to know 2 very well in order to answer this question. But you still need a point, 1 advantage, and an explanation of why it's an advantage to the business. So on the screen now you'll see that there are the advantages of a cash flow forecasting. Now any of those will help you to write one of the answers, or one of the points. So it kind of looks like this. It will identify potential times when the business needs money so it can make changes to stop it happening. With that in mind, you'll get the 1st mark for the 1st point. So it ends there. It will identify potential times when the business needs money. That's the advantage of a cash flow. Why is that a good thing? Because it then, the business, if it identifies when it needs money, it can take steps to change it, to stop it happening. So therefore you'll get the 2 marks there. Then move on to the 2nd point. There's an answer. It can help to set targets. Therefore that's your advantage of a cash flow. Therefore 1 mark there. So the enterprise does not overspend, because if you've set a target, you're not going to spend over that because that's the target. Therefore, 1 more mark there. Here's what the mark scheme says. Pause the video, have a quick read of those, because it will give you some more advantages and approaches to answering the question. Okay, on to the 6 marker. Here's a typical question that you will have to be answering. Now, what's important for this type of question is the stem of the question. Again, the stem is the information within the borders, and you will see that the command word is discuss. Now if you look at that, your approach is no different to that of an explain question, where you would need to have one argument and then a connective to explain why it's an argument or to answer the question. So because it's a discuss question, there will be two sides of the argument. In this case, it's whether Sid should be using business angels or not. You'll know business angels as venture capital, Dragon's Den, or anything like that, and carries the same advantages and disadvantages that you have done previously on your homework. So just make sure when you're looking at your justification that it's coming from the stem of the question. But again, each point only needs to be 2, maybe 3 sentences, and if you do that, the 6 marks should be there. So if we have a quick look at the mark scheme. So these are the mark. This is the mark scheme, and you will have to be able to look at an argument either side. So don't be biased, just use your judgment, and then it doesn't need a conclusion. It doesn't need to say which one they should go for, because it doesn't say recommend whether or whether she should go for business angels or not. A couple of things I do want to point out for you though. Looking at the mark scheme in terms of the positive factors of using business angels, if we look at this answer here, the reason that answer is, or that point is written and highlighted, is because as you can see, it's coming from the stem of the question, as is this the third positive factor. So you can see that the mark scheme is telling us to use the stem of the question in order to justify why it's an advantage. The same with the negatives. If you look at the first point of the negative, Sid is not sure of the amount of finance she needs and so may not have a clear set of financial projections. It tells us in the stem. So the exam board are telling us use that information to make sure you are justifying your point. Now the reason I've highlighted this next part in blue is because actually this part of the question comes from an earlier question of calculating gross and net profit. So the context at the start of the exam is very important, and you use all the information to justify your points. Okay, let's move on to the calculation questions. This calculation question we have done in class, but I'm going over it again so you've got a permanent reminder of it. This type of calculation can be going towards any financial document, whether it be invoice or a credit note. The principles remain the same. So if we have a quick look at it, the first thing to note is that pounds and pence are in separate columns. So you must make sure that you are writing your pounds and pence in the different columns. That's not always the case on these financial documents. In the exam, you're going to have to be aware of it, because otherwise, if we take the unit price of the mixed dried berries, it's got £48.50. If you wrote £48.50 in the pounds column, it reads as 4,850, and therefore a mistake will be made. So please be aware that pounds and pence generally, not all the time, are in separate columns. Make that judgment when you see the exam paper. So the first mark is all about calculating what products are bought and the total amount to pay. Well, to get the first mark, all you need to do is look at the quantity, which in this case is 4, and the unit price, which is £48.50. You times the two together, you get the answer of £194, which we put correctly in the right column, pounds and pence. Your second mark is just adding everything up to get your goods total. So 252 plus 194 gives you an answer of £446. Again, it goes in the right columns, so we get the marks. Now this time there's a discount, and discount is all about calculating percentages. So your percentage will be 5 divided by 100 times what you're finding the percentage of. There are several ways you can calculate percentages. You do what's most comfortable. For me, and I think the most simplest way is to just do it the way I've done it. And you get an answer of £22.30, which again goes in that column. Now your subtotal is dealing with the percentage. As you know, that percentage could be VAT. In this case, it's discount. But if it's VAT, you need to add it. But because it's a discount in this scenario, it needs to come off the total, which means you get that answer, £423.70. The final mark is just adding the delivery, which means you get a final answer of £429.69. Be aware that this type of question will carry an ECF, and your ECF will apply anywhere along the calculations. So as long as you know the formula and you know what you're adding and taking away, if you've made a small mistake, you'll still get the marks. So the next type of question that needs to be answered is another business numeracy, but this time it's drawing the break-even graph. Now remember, your break-even graph should be a line graph, and you need to plot the points. So it looks like this. I'm going to go in order that the question tells me. So we've got to do the fixed cost line. So we plot the points, noting that our y-axis is costs and revenue, and our x-axis are the number of jars. So in the fixed cost, we've got 0 and 150. Therefore, at 0 products, the fixed costs are 150. So you plot it with an X. Now you could go along the line and measure and plot every single point. However, there's no need to. Because we know these are going to be straight lines, you could do the first and last plot or coordinates, and that should give you the correct answer. In this case, it's 200 and 150, so we'll plot the point of numbers of jars, 200, and the plot and the fixed cost of 150. So now I've got 2 points. If I just draw a straight line between them, that then becomes my fixed cost. Please be aware, again, in the exam, the number of jars that you've plotted accurately. The graph goes up to 300, so please be aware of the numbers and the coordinates, because you will lose marks from there. So we've dealt with the fixed cost line. We now move on to the total cost line. Again, we're going to just simply plot the first and last point. So our total cost line at 0 is 150. So I plot that point again, 0 plus 0, 150. I then go to the final point, which is 200, and it's 350. So I plot the point, 250, 200 products, £350. There's my point. Join the dots with a nice straight line and ruler and pencil, and it comes out as your total costs. So we now need the total revenue line. So again, we do the same thing. With the total revenue line, we know we're going to be plotting points. So we have got 0 and 0. That's our first point. So we go to 0 and 0, plot the point. That's us. That's the first point done. Go to the last one, which is 200 and 500. Plot the point, and then draw the line. So there you've got your 3 lines. So we've dealt with the fixed cost line, the total cost line, and the total revenue line. Now it tells us to break even. So we label the break-even point. The break-even point is there, where the total revenue crosses the total cost line. Now be aware that there is an ECF here, in a sense that if you've got the total cost line wrong or the total revenue line wrong and it crosses at a different spot, you may not get the line, you might not get the marks for the lines that are drawn wrongly, but if you label the point at which they cross as break even, that you will still get the mark because that's ECF. Okay, the final calculation question we're going to look at is the forecasted profit and loss account. This is something that we did in component 2 because you needed it for your business plan. So this is a quick refresher on how to answer the questions with the formulas. So the question is asking us to work out gross profit and it's to work out total expenses and then our net profit. So we know our formula to be revenue minus cost of sales. That's for gross profit. Therefore, looking at the information, our revenue is 52,310. Our cost of sales is 23,250. Take them away, and therefore you get an answer of £29,060, which is our gross profit. We then look at the expenses, add them together to get an answer of 25,520. So coming on to the third and final mark, we look at net profit, the formula being gross profit minus expenses. Therefore our gross profit is 29,060. Our total expenses is 25,520, which gives us an answer of 3,540. which is your net profit. Again, be aware that ECF is available for this question. So even if you get a few figures wrong or misspell or miswrite a couple of numbers, you will still get the marks. So year 11, that's it for the written and the calculation part of this presentation. What you have now got are two final slides showing you all the formulas that you need to know going into this exam. So there's one slide here, there's one slide there, so you can switch between the two to make sure that you know the formulas. Good luck for tomorrow morning, year 11. I'm sure you'll smash it.